Welcome to Windows on the World, bringing you cutting-edge news, empowering information, and no conspiracy theories. On tonight's show, today on Windows on the World, we're going to catch up with James, whose investigative reporting has uncovered corruption within the courts, the job centre, TV licensing, which is where he started this journey, and the repercussions and the information of what happened to James does affect everybody. So James, welcome back to Windows on the World.
Thanks a lot, Mark. It's great to be back on your show.
Okay, so your journey's been quite a long one, and it's not even got to any form of satisfactory conclusion. So for the sake of the listeners out there, can you just give us a bit of a backstory of how all this started?
Yeah, it started in June of 2012, in fact a little bit before it, relating to the TV licence case matters. So my whole journey began around that time. So on the 6th of June 2012, a warrant was issued to enter and search premises at the time. Now, bearing in mind for your viewing public out there that you're a member of the public listening to this show, perhaps even for the first time, and you've never heard any of this stuff. So you've got to put me in the same boat as you there, that at that time I had no idea of what all this was about. I had no idea of what law and rights actually was until I researched into it myself. So I began reacting to this warrant being served on my address within June of 2012. I knew that it was completely wrong. And what I discovered is that perjury had been committed to obtain the warrant. Application for this was made in February of 2013, which is right at the time when I started writing the reports as a member of the public who doesn't know anything, who's going to document everything, so that I don't have to explain what it is I've done to try and get remedy. And we are 2 years later, and we've reached a climax now where the next stage is the High Courts and possible application for criminal charges being brought up, because we do have very significant laws that have been broken, and these laws that have been broken means that criminal offences have been committed. So back to TV licensing, there's this warrant that's been executed. I know it's fraudulent. I've obtained the deposition, which is the information laid on oath. So for the viewing public again, what's happened here is TV licensing have gone to Kirklees Magistrates Courts and they've written out a statement. Now, the significance of this statement is that it's sworn on oath, and we'll talk about this later when we talk about affidavits, which is part of the remedy for these matters. So this statement made on oath, that a justice of the peace or a magistrate or a judge, whatever term you want to use, has considered this information, and based on that information have authorised a search warrant to enter and search premises.
Yes, just to clarify here, James, a complaint has to be laid at the court. So, in other words, an officer made this complaint, and the officer was an officer of Capita, who are a private company who enforce TV licensing.
That's right. That's exactly right. Capita is a private entity operating under TV licensing /BBC. Now, what people have to understand is that these subnames like TV licensing is only a trademark. I mentioned this in your last show. It's just a trademark. The governing body is the BBC Trust. So I just wanted to get that point in. And like you say, rightly so, it's Capita who've made an application to the courts. Now, this point you've made about making an application is key, because without that application, without a seal and a sign from a consideration from authorised personnel at the court, with a fee paid for the application, then becomes a county court. So there's a record. It becomes a court of record, and in compliance with one of the rules of the court, and I'll just bring that up. Yeah, here we have it. The County Courts Act 1984, Section 1, Paragraph 2. Every court so held shall be called a county court, and shall be a court of record, and shall have a seal. And that is the County Courts Act 1984. So my journey begins with requesting information that resulted in this warrant being executed, that was made by a private entity.
Yes, but the thing is here, James, it's very important, is that officer, as you rightly stated, went under oath to make that complaint. And this is where it went wrong from the very start, wasn't it?
Yes, because what he's done is, by making this oath in a court of law that has resulted in my privacy and dignity being violated, he has committed perjury. And this is where the criminal matter comes into it now.
Very much so. But as the courts are acting purely administratively in these matters, a lot of these people who are officers are unaware that they are personally liable for the actions they take. And we've covered this with the councils, with Pantomime Council Court Procedure, which you've also had some very interesting experiences of, and found the same thing. So what we're talking about here is an administrative system where people as officers and public servants are laying information that is either incorrect or complete lies, which is against any kind of due process in the court. You're not allowed to do that. They're committing perjury, as you rightly said. So carry on, James. What happened next?
That's fun. Yeah, that's exactly right. So you've just basically summarised where we are, and that's great. And for the viewing public, again, these applications can be accessed by you as you are the subject of the warrant. You've got every right and entitlement to view these documents, and that is in fact part of, again, the CPR rules. Here is another one: civil procedure rules. This may not necessarily be used in the council tax matter. I had to use a different rule, but for the civil procedure rules relating to council tax, listen to this: CPR R.5.4.2. Supply of documents to parties, including new parties. The documents should be supplied within 48 hours after a written request for them is received. CPR R.5.4, paragraph 1. Supply of documents from court records. Any party to proceedings may be supplied from the records of the court with a copy of any document relating to those proceedings, including documents filed before the claim was commenced. So these are very powerful rules. They are their rules. These are their rules that they are not following. So straight away, when you go to a court and you cannot acquire the information, in my experience, that usually means that there is no real court, and therefore there's a fraud and perjury being committed. That's one of the biggest telltale signs of it, and that's more than enough reason and intent to start investigating these matters. So going back to the TV licence matter, once a discovered perjury had been committed, well, a crime had been committed. So remedy. So what do we do? Well, speak to the courts. You speak to the police. Went down to the police, tried to report the matter of perjury. And an Inspector Absey, who refused to take the reporting of a crime, I made a complaint against him, and that's what people have to do. They'll always suggest you go to the IPCC. I would recommend against that, because although the IPCC stands for Independent Police Complaints Commission, I think it stands for the Independent Police Cover-Up Commission. What you should really do is make a direct letter, a formal complaints letter with a heading, directly to the Chief Superintendent and the Professional Standards Department. And that's going to be your fastest, in my experience, and this is all documented again. Everything that we're saying, all the case files have been made public. So these are public case files, and I can provide the links, which I think you already have, Mark, but we can provide the links for those there. So what they've done is they've refused to take this reporting of a crime, and I've made a complaint against Inspector Absey, and it was upheld. Right enough, the complaint was upheld, because rightly so, he'd refused to take a reporting of a crime. So that shows you right there that in actual fact, his duty was to actually take that report and process it. That's due diligence that they have to exercise, and he didn't do that. And this is an inspector we're talking about here. So it's very powerful stuff to get rejected from the police like that, because ultimately I've got no recourse now. So what they've done is they've upheld the complaint, obviously, and then what they've done is they've told me that on the balance of probabilities that they wouldn't investigate the matter. Well, it was the balance of probabilities, like again I mentioned in your first show, that motivated me to get the warrant in the first place. And for your viewing public, if you followed this up to this point, remember what's happened. They've gone to the courts, committed perjury to obtain a warrant to come into my home that violates my rights, whether I understand it or not. I was severely distressed and alarmed over it, which is why I went to the courts to remedy the matter. And now both the courts and the police are refusing to look into the matter.
That's absolutely right, James, and that's what happens, because these people, public servants and officers, they all cover each other's backs at this low level. And a very important point here is that if these people aren't operating within the law or using the correct procedures, then everything they are doing is invalid. And I think you've proved this on several occasions so far, as we have in the past, because what tends to happen is they start running away and covering their tracks, and you get somebody else responding for the person who's the respondent, and they basically throw away any personal liability, and we have to keep bringing them back to personal liability.
Yes, and on that point, there's another good little law I could bring in right there. It's the Fraud Act of 2006, and it goes, Section 4, fraud by abuse of position. Exactly what you're talking about there, Mark. Paragraph 1, a person is in breach of this section if he, A, occupies a position in which he is expected to safeguard or not to act against the financial interests of another person. And again, I know we've been talking about civil matters. This is actually a criminal matters, but this is a civil procedure rule, again, because we're going into the council tax next, which is actually a civil matter. But what they are doing is committing crime, perjury, which is a crime, therefore it's becoming a criminal matter. So people need to understand the difference there. It's originally a civil matter, and then it's becoming a criminal matter because of the way they are conducting themselves. B, dishonestly abuses that position. And that's what these people are doing. These authorised personnel of the courts who are supposed to be verifying this information are basically abusing their position by not actually, and we've checked, certainly in the case of council tax, they are physically not verifying this information, and we have physical, actual proof of this. If people don't believe this, we're going to explain why it is the case in a little while. And C, intends by means of the abuse of that position to make a gain for himself or another, or to cause loss to another, or to expose another to risk of loss. So, these positions that are being abused is resulting in all these criminal acts against us, violating human rights and rights to live with dignity, which, by the way, the Cameron wants to repeal, the Human Rights Act. So, tying into a bigger picture, which we can talk about later, that's all about removing his rights and becoming more and more of a police state, which is to live as slaves, in my opinion.
That's right, James, and we covered that a couple of weeks ago in a show I did called The Global Cabal, which actually covers all this stuff and how it's implemented locally. But just to sum this section up, it's very, very important that this private officer, this public servant, laid a complaint with the police that he did under oath, which wasn't true. The police then stated, when you made a complaint about this, that the balance of probabilities suggested that they were going to go with the Capita employee. So they've immediately shown prejudice, and also they've gone against their remit of investigation and fairness.
Yes, because what they've done is essentially refused the evidence that supports what my claim is, what my complaint is against Capita. And what they've done by doing that is to deliberately ignore, with intent, to side with Capita, which is party to the crime that's of perjury that's being committed. They're aiding and abetting now. They're taking sides, and they're not supposed to be doing that.
We've got many examples of that in our show, The Property Pirates, for instance, but we've been covering this for several years, that what you've got is these so-called public bodies and public servants who are cooperating entirely and are in partnership with private interests. We see this with the police working with bailiff companies, although not all police are doing this, but there is a cabal of police, private employees, and also when we get into property theft, estate agents and auctioneers working together to steal property. We've already proved that. So it shouldn't be any surprise that at this lower end of the spectrum, this stuff is just done administratively by these people and with no thought of any consequences, especially personally, because these people are making themselves personally liable. And what the government are doing is they are removing our ability to make public servants liable for their actions.
Yeah, that's right. And what we've also found is that the fastest way to get remedy to these matters is to get to the source of the person who made the complaint against you and hold them liable for it. One of the things we need to realise is that there are good people still within the system, and what they need is for members of the public, like you, myself, and the viewing public, to actually make these complaints. If the good people inside are not getting help from the other side, that there's going to be no progress made. And on the flip side of the coin to that, we need the good people on the inside that, should we do make these complaints and provide all the necessary paperwork and follow all the rules that they themselves are not following, to do the right thing. Otherwise, it will result in what we've now discovered to be the only form of remedy, which is to go to the high courts. And it's getting to the point where all the procedures involved in that are now out there. We know what to do now. We know how to make complaints against you guys. You've really got to stop doing what you're doing, committing this fraud and perjury and thinking that you're going to get away with it, because you're not.
That's a great point. That's a great point, James, because this is where it does work. I've had very good results from going after these people. You're getting these results. Many people are now doing it, because what happens with this administrative court procedure, everything within this admiralty system, this merchant system, relies on every single aspect of paperwork and information to be absolutely in order. And if it's not, it falls apart on the day. And this is what's happened when I took my local authority to court. This has happened with what you've been doing, and many other people are finding this. If you've got your paperwork and all of your information correctly and in the form of an affidavit, which I know that you've recently started to do, then it will stop this administrative process before they can make their claim against you.
Yeah, that's right. That's actually very key, is that actually, Matt? Because the affidavit is pretty much the next sort of closing statement to the TV licence matter, where eventually it leads on to the next subject, which is Bradford Council tax. It's taken all this time of documentation, the recording of calls, documenting that into the report so that the viewing public can basically listen to another fellow man like themselves who's just, what do we do? You know, what do we do? How do we get remedy to these matters? And it's all led, all of these, it's all led to the fact that it has to be on paper. And what we mean by that is the applications themselves. For example, this TV licence, they've gone to the courts and they've submitted a document on oath. Well, that's what we have to do.
Exactly.
And that's what's called, that's countering them. So they've gone to the courts for you. You're going to go to the courts for them as a counter, and you're going to produce your sworn statement on oath.
Exactly, James. What we've been talking about so far is these people who are going into a court or putting in a complaint and they're committing perjury because what they're putting down is inaccurate or untrue. Now, an unrebutted affidavit stands as the only truth in that court unless it's rebutted. Now, if you put your affidavit in, a lot of these courts, they don't really like it, but you have to just make sure that's in your bundle and take several copies of your affidavit to that court because they do like to lose them. But once that's with the magistrate or judge, they have to rely on that, look at it, and then you can start cross-examining the other side or questioning them. And that's when it falls apart for them, because councils and these corporations, they just walk into court and they think they're going to win.
Yeah, that's right. Well, they think that because they've become complacent. They think they're going to win because they have won for such a long time. It's gone unrebutted for so long. We've failed to, we've just taken it on the chin. We've ranted about it. We've said there's effing bees and this to them, and then we've got over it and life's gone on, and then we're getting stung again, and no one's actually going out and doing anything about it. So what we've discovered now is that when you know that a crime's been committed, perjury's been committed, and you have physical evidence of that, which is just extraordinary how they will not address it when you've even provided the evidence. It's just remarkable.
Yeah, one of the reasons for that is that this is quite important, I think, is that when you go into a court and you state that these people are committing fraud and they've perjured themselves, these are extremely serious crimes. These are criminal offences, and they're taking it out of a civil matter into criminal, and the judges and magistrates do not want to go there because the repercussions of that are incredibly serious.
That's right. That's exactly right. Because they are also liable. I mean, these people have authorised for a search warrant, or they've authorised to have a bailiff come and remove your possessions for an amount that you do not owe, or is in dispute, and that there is no court authority to do so. So there's lots of things going wrong because they are not following their own rules, and redress is even harder for them because then they have to answer as to why didn't they in the first place? And ultimately it proves that the whole search warrant system around TV licensing is just completely dead. It doesn't work. And that's ultimately what we've proven in the end. And this is what currently now there's, a lot of things going on in the news about TV licensing.
Yes, there was one the other day of a woman who was threatened by TV licensing because people were watching television on their iPhones in her restaurant.
Yes, well, it's funny you should mention that. BBC silence over the licence loophole, you see. Corporation refuses to say how many households do not need one because they use catch-up online. Now, the Communications Act of 2003 is to watch or record live broadcasting as it's being broadcast. So if you're using live catch-up, you don't need a licence, and they don't want to reveal that figure because then it basically shows that the fee, the actual fee, people don't need to pay it. They're obviously worrying about losing their biggest source of income for the BBC TV licensing fees, £145.50 a year. And there's a lot of issues around it as well. It's not in modern times. These laws, this private company is taking advantage of the Communications Act 2003 legislation that just doesn't work in this century now. It's just, we're past it, you know. They're pumping out these BBC broadcasting signals, which are unencrypted. I mean, it's like they've brought carbon taxes in, so they're going to charge you for breathing the oxygen that's in the air. If they really bothered about people viewing their signals, they would encrypt them, and that's where all the discussions about turning the BBC TV licensing into a subscription has come into talk. So things, mainstream is slowly catching up, slowly. But that's as a result of all this information being put out. It's out there now. There's no disputing it anymore.
That's right, which is why the BBC want to introduce a blanket tax through the government. In other words, so they do away with the licence and everybody has to pay. Whether they'll get away with that, we don't know yet. But in summing up this this part of the show, how is this left now? What happened with your TV licensing case when the court case happened?
We are now is that as of I think it's the 24th, so just a few days ago, I've now issued my first affidavit, which I had notarised at my local solicitors, stating all of the facts regarding the TV licence visitations that resulted in perjury being committed to obtain a warrant to enter and search premises. And what the position I've put TV licensing now is that they need to rebut that with evidence, point by point on my affidavit. It's a sworn statement. It's my complaint against them, and unless they rebut it, it stands as truth in the courts. And then we'll see what the courts are going to do about it. So that's where we are on the TV licensing front. So it's very exciting because it's been sent to them special delivery. It's been signed and received, and I've given them I've been generous. I think it's 14 days usually. I've given them 21 days to respond point by point with evidence. And I'm also going to be issuing this back to the police station, Bradford South Police, and get them to rebut it, because if they can't rebut it, then I want them to proceed with an investigation into the criminal matters of perjury regarding Neil Blood TV licensing.
So that's great. If people go out and do that, if they have these people from a private company knocking on their door and then obtaining a warrant from the court, always question it, because often, and in your case, definitely, perjury took place. So you put them on the spot there. You got your affidavit done. That's the highest statement of truth. So it'd be very interesting to see what happens in the future with that. But everybody should be putting their witness statements into affidavits or even statutory declarations, getting them down to the court, and basically interrupting this administrative process which runs on fraud.
Yes, and you're going to proceed with the law and the rule of law, and that's how you're going to win. So, and to finish off nicely on that, I can tell share a little story as well for the viewing public. When I was down getting my first affidavits done, she did turn around to me and say, "Do you know, not many people, we don't get many people coming in to do this anymore." And I looked at her and I said to her, "Well, that's a shame, because this is one of the most powerful things in law a member of the public can use." And she looked at me and gave me a little smile and a little nod, and they went, "Yes, they are." So there you go, people.
That's exactly right. So we've been talking about this for quite some time. Affidavits do work. What they also do is they focus the information. So you when you put things down in an affidavit or statutory declaration, they're just statements of truth. They are just the main points that you want to get across, and if they're true, and they have to be true, then it will stop all of this administrative nonsense in its tracks.
Yes, the judges have to respond to these affidavits. They have to. You can phone the courts and rant until you're blue in the face. Unless you've got it down on paper and in front of a judge, he himself is subject then. He's your subject. You've just made the judge your subject to carry your requests out, to administer the law. So you're taking control when you do that.
Yes, you're using the judge as an official in office to basically take record of your statement of truth and put it on the court of records. So when you go into a court, there's no need to say anything. All that you have to do is present your affidavit and refer to it. You do not have to refer to any other information. You do not have to answer any other questions, because everything that you are relying on in that court is in that document, and it's a sworn statement of fact and truth.
Anything else is irrelevant. It's all what's on that affidavit. Those are your points.
Thanks for joining us on Windows on the World. Remember, keep watching those, watching us, watching Windows on the World. We'll see you soon.